I'm Kim Bailey, and this is Floral Art Review, where we have DesignEye, our AI, analyse an old competition piece of mine and give us some pointers for how it met the principles and elements of design and where there were areas for improvement. This week we're looking at City and Country. This was from a regional agricultural show that is a city within a country area, and so it was supposed to depict the mixed elements that come together for that particular show. It was 70 centimetres in width that we were allowed, the height was unlimited, and it was judged from the front. And as you can see, I've used one of those large martini glasses that we sometimes see in home decor stores. And I also have a large brandy balloon type one, but I find the martini glass is actually easier to work with in terms of floral art. So what I've done is covered the base of the glass and extended a little bit with some paper bark off a melaleuca, an Australian native tree, and then some small agapanthus heads without the flowers, obviously, and some twisted foliage that goes up the stem of the glass to the glass itself. Inside the glass there is foam, but that's masked by some cast iron plants, aspidistra. The words will come to me eventually, because it's good in and out of the water. You can see I've put a bow in the middle of the design there, which is a satin ribbon one, which was supposed to show a little bit of elegance, as was the glass. And then the mixture of plant material all across the top, I've used a lichened branch across the top to extend the design out so that I get a little bit more of the right dimensions for the design. And then I've incorporated into that a mix of flowers, so some that we would expect to see in the city, like roses, and those that we would expect to see here in this country, which is the Australian native grevillea and bottlebrush. The other element that I put there is some gum nuts that are hanging down from the top of the top part of the design, and that was to incorporate the base into the design. I didn't want it to look like it was two halves, the design. So there we have City and Country. The design placed second in the competition, and I guess I was happy enough with it, but I really felt that it was a good depiction of City and Country. The design that won was much more country than it was city, and I guess that's what the judges were looking for. On this particular occasion, looking at it now though, I have some concerns. I have concerns about the bow and about the top of the design looking a little bit too heavy. So let's go in and see what DesignEye, has to say and how it can help me improve this design, or thinking about this design, this class title, in the future. The overall comment, first of all, was this floral arrangement effectively juxtaposes the contrasting themes of urban elegance, the city, and natural ruggedness, the country, through its choice of materials, structure, and balance. So that's a good overall assessment, because we're looking at the plant material, the structure of it, the balance. So though they are parts of the elements and principles of design, that it's obviously met in terms of reflecting the title, the class title. Now let's look individually at those elements and principles and see what the assessment is. Balance, first of all. The martini glass provides an elegant urban focal point, while the branches, bark and wildflowers introduce the untamed essence of the countryside. So exactly what I said in the introduction is this is what I wanted it to depict. The design is asymmetrically balanced, with the horizontal weight of the branch extending outward, contrasting against the sleek vertical bars. The hanging gum nuts add a subtle downward pull, complementing the weight distribution and preventing the upper section from feeling too heavy. So exactly what I thought when I looked at it after all of these years, is that I still think that that top part is too heavy, it's too busy for the rest of the design. I've got some issues about the base as well, but we'll keep going with our AI analysis. Proportion and scale. The base material, the bark, is slightly smaller in proportion compared to the overall arrangement, which could be expanded to better ground the design. Now what it's saying here is that the area that I covered with the bark should extend out so that it is a reflection of the top edges of the design, and I can see that that would have enhanced the design, and I might have made it a few different shapes, or what I could have done is had something underneath it all that extended all the way out, that was more a city thing, so something that was a bit more sleek, so perhaps a more polished base and the bark on top of that, but not extending all the way out, so that we had that juxtaposition once again in the base. But I'd have to be fairly careful because there is a bit of glass in this design already, and glass can be very distracting in designs. The branch extensions are well proportioned, but one side slightly dominates, making it feel a little imbalanced in its reach. That was my feeling too, is that in that top section, basically there's just too much material, and so it feels top heavy, it looks top heavy to me, and I would like to go in and just pull some things out and make it a bit more open and a bit more airy. The delicate elements, the flowers, the gumnuts and the bow, contrast with the heavier branches, ensuring a dynamic yet harmonious scale. Well, that's good. Rhythm and movement. The flowing greenery and extending branches create a natural rhythm, drawing the eye across the piece, which is good. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. The looped foliage and suspended gumnuts introduce gentle movement, adding to the fluidity of the design, and that's at the base. My concern there is that that looping of the foliage I haven't really made obvious in the top section, so there's no connection visually between the two. The placement of colours, red, yellow and orange roses, is slightly clustered, which could be better dispersed to improve the rhythmic flow. And that's exactly how I feel, is that top section, it's all just a bit spotty and a bit too, I was going to say amateurish, but it's a less polished placement than I would have hoped to have in the design. Contrast and dominance. The contrast between smooth and rough textures, glass versus bark, soft flowers versus rigid branches, strengthens the theme of city and country. The bright roses dominate as a focal element, while the softer greens and yellows provide secondary contrast. The shiny ribbon, while adding a refined touch, slightly competes with the natural elements. A more organic material might enhance harmony. And I think that's very true. I think that's the glaring thing when I look at the design. I'm drawn to the bow, and I don't want to be drawn to the bow because, as we know, it's an embellishment. It's a non-plant material addition to the design. So I think something in the Hessian, or something that even something made out of bark, something that was a bit more less dominant in its presentation. And when it talks about the shininess of the ribbon, that's the drawback with glass and as I said, with anything that I might put on the base there, is that I can't have anything that's any more shiny, because that's where your eye goes first. So I'd have to really think about what I wanted to add there. It might just be that I had some Hessian, but I had the gumnuts stuck to it, so that it was a combination of elegance in terms of the bow, but being made out of the more countrified material, so it has that contrast within it. Unity and harmony. The combination of natural and structural elements is cohesive, successfully reflecting city and country theme. The use of botanical materials from different environments, roses versus Australian native plants, enhances the contrast but remains unified by the colour palette. The base and upper portion feel somewhat disconnected. An additional element linking them, such as cascading greenery or subtle floral detail on the bark, could improve unity. And I think that is very true. It does look to me still, even with the bow and the hanging gumnuts, it still looks like a design in two parts. And I think extending the base would help that, because it would reflect the size at the top of the base. So you get that visual connection between the edges of the design. But I think also that bringing some of the colour down into the base would have helped as well. Line. The strong horizontal line created by the branches anchors the design, while the vertical bars counterbalances it with a refined presence, which is good, because it's hard to introduce two lines into a design and not have them conflicting, not have them crossing. And so creating some uncertainty when we look at it in terms of our visual balance. The suspended gum nuts and curved foliage introduce soft organic lines contrasting with the angular extensions of the branches. So the line in terms of the gum nuts hanging down whilst it's curved still is a vertical line, and we've got that very strong horizontal presence at the top. Texture. The smooth polished glass contrasts with the rough organic bark, reinforcing the urban-rural theme. The flowers introduce a soft, delicate texture, while the branches and leaves provide a rustic counterpart. The shiny ribbon, though elegant, slightly disrupts the natural cohesion. A matte or textured fabric might be better integrate into the composition. I hesitated over that because I was thinking, yes, I didn't mention a matte ribbon, and I've got matte ribbon here, so I could still have had the ribbon for the elegance, but had it matte, not shiny, to add to it. And perhaps the ribbon itself doesn't really fit into the colour palette because it's that sort of ivory white with a gold edge to it. And I think when I was doing it, I was thinking that it would match some of the flowers and be in keeping with the bark at the base. But it's not when you look at it. And this is why I'll often say to you to take a photo and walk away from your design, look at the photo, and then come back to the design, because you will see in the photo things that your eye glosses over. You know, we fill in the gaps, we make it look like we wanted it to look rather than how it actually looks. And so it's important. Had I taken the photo before taking my own advice, do as I say, not as I do, then I would have seen that that ribbon was not right, I would hope, and that I needed to search around for another ribbon. You could, if you think about it, and you looked at the predominance of the yellow colours, if I had a pale yellow ribbon there, that it would still be elegant, but it would bring the colour from the top down into the base a little bit more, or a green ribbon even, but that's for another day. Colour. The warm reds, yellows, oranges add vibrancy, drawing attention to the floral elements. The greens and browns create a naturalistic, earthy contrast, grounding the design. So the colour palette is, I'm comfortable with the colour palette. It's all of the things that I wanted to include. A slightly more intentional placement of the colours, e.g. evenly dispersing the warm hues rather than clustering them, could enhance balance and unity. So what it's saying there is that I have grouped or massed the colours together, and it would be better to almost go like a rainbow, so go through the different shades and tints of the colours throughout the design rather than try and bring them all together too much. Definitely something I would think about. Space. The negative space between branches and vase is well managed, preventing overcrowding. The slightly empty area at the base could be softened with a trailing element or moss-like texture to integrate it more smoothly. The hanging gum nuts subtly fill the vertical space, preventing an abrupt break between the vase and the lower section. I still think there's too much of a break between the lower section. You can see that I've got one bit of foliage that is coming down. I really needed to have a lot more foliage that was coming down so that it was a whole design. It incorporated the base rather than being the base up the stem and then the top heavy part of the design. So let's see what we've got in suggestions for the design. So strengthen the connection between the city, the glass vase, and the country, the bark base. Consider adding a trailing greenery element, cascading vines or fine foliage from the upper structure down to the bark to better connect the two zones. A small floral textural accent on the bark base could also help unify top and bottom sections. So we've talked about that all the way through. You can see now, I think, having looked at the individual elements and principles, where that would work with this design. Wouldn't be too much, just one or two, even some rapsalis or something that really would genuinely hang down. And the beauty of the rapsalis is that it's got the ending bits where it's all growing out would reflect the agapanthus heads that I've got at the bottom there. So that would work as well. Refine the balance of branch extensions. The branch on the left is visually heavier than the right, creating a slightly uneven feel. Consider shortening or adjusting the angle of the dominant branch to soften the weight difference. That's something that I worked at very hard. I remember when I put this design together that I knew that I needed physical balance as well as visual balance. And of course you put the branches on first and then you add all of the floral elements on top. And I think that I've just added too much in the floral elements, and so you lose sight of one end of the branch and see a lot at the other end. So that's definitely something that I would consider. I like to see the branch either side because I think it adds to the interpretation. So I would probably look at changing how far out I am extending the plate material that is within the vase rather than doing anything too much with the branches themselves. Enhance the rhythm and colour placement. So the warm-toned roses are slightly clustered in one area. Spreading them more evenly would improve visual flow. A subtle repetition of the floral hues in the lower section would help tie the colour palette together. And that's, as we've talked about, or I've talked about all the way through, that's definitely something that I would consider. What I wanted to do with those placements at the top was reflect it was city and country, so you find both in that environment, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't have them spread along a little bit better, have two or three or one of the roses in amongst the other plate material, native plate material. It would still work as an interpretation. Modify the ribbon for better integration. The shiny white ribbon is elegant, but it contrasts slightly too much with the organic textures. A matte raw silk or raffia ribbon could blend more seamlessly while maintaining a refined element. So again, we talked about that a little bit on our way through, and I think that's a very valid point. I'm growing to very much dislike that ribbon sitting there in the middle of the image. Expand the base for stronger grounding. The bark is a great rustic element, but could be slightly wider or layered more to provide a more stable looking foundation. And that, again, I talked about right at the beginning, is that I think what I'd probably do is have something that was elegant underneath it, like a tray or something like that, and then have the bark on it so that there was the layered effect of city and country as well as the glass being on the bark itself. So overall, the final thoughts, this arrangement is an excellent representation of city and country theme with its contrast of refined rustic materials, dynamic movement and engaging textures. With slight refinements in balance, unity and material transitions, this design could become even more cohesive and visually immersive. And I think that that's very true. Everything we've talked about all the way through, looking at just those three things, the balance, the unity of the design, and that brings in the colour and the placements, and the material transitions between the top and the bottom are things that I would have lost points for in the judging, and so I can see that it was not, even to my standard, it's not as good an interpretation as I could have done having had the review. And that's really what these videos are about. It's about encouraging you to think and rethink about your designs after you've done them, and to look at ways that you could alter this or alter that or think about other things so that your education in terms of floral art and your floral art journey becomes a lifetime learning experience, which makes it more interesting, I can tell you. So let me leave you with that thought. I'm Q Bailey and this is Floral Art Review.